Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to the first Christian Media Summit. This year, due to COVID-19, we decided to continue our tradition virtually. We are all together in this fight against the pandemic and pray to find an end to it quickly. In the midst of this world pandemic, historical peace agreements have been signed. Israel has made peace with Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates thanks to the enormous efforts of United States President Mr. Donald J. Trump. This is a great opportunity to give thanks for the good things in our lives and pray for a fully and speedy recovery of all those ill. We have an amazing program for you this evening, tonight. The Prime Minister, the President, His Excellency, and Ambassador Friedman, and many other great treats. This wonderful tradition of the Christian Media Summit is thanks to the continuous work of Gpo Director Mr Nitsan. The Gpo team, led by Mr. Khan, has worked tirelessly in the past few months to bring all of us together in the best way possible during these hard times of undergoing the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to invite to the stage Gpo Director Mr. Nitsan.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to all of you distinguished guests who are joining us from far and wide. Welcome to Jerusalem, here at the Friends of Zion Museum. It's given me a great pleasure to extend very warm welcome to you all, wherever you are, on behalf of the Israeli Government Press Office. The Christian Media Summit has become a valued tradition in our calendar, and we are not prepared to give up on this tremendous event, no matter what. The summit has become one of the anchors of our yearly events, where we have the unique opportunity to catch up with our colleagues around the world in the Christian media and in general, and to take this opportunity to share ideas and possibilities. In these unprecedented times, sharing knowledge and interacting with our friends and colleagues has become a prime importance. Holding on these things that keep us focused allows us to create and build our future, and this at the top of our priorities. Though we may be separate but turning oil around us and joined virtually through technology, there is something amazing in the fact that our world has become so accessible, and we can reach into each other's homes and hearts at press of a button. There is so much potential for good in that we should recognize the positive possibilities in our fingertips. Not only that, we have seen that even in the midst of hardship, the opportunity to reach out to each other can have historic results. The Abraham Accords heralds the beginning of major peace in the Middle East, of a real change of direction and the moving towards peace and prosperities. And we are delighted and excited to utter the word peace once again. One word, however, that almost none of us had ever attended before this year was Corona, maybe less than a beer. Corona in Latin, as you know, means crown, and we use this word to describe crown like scalps on the surface on this terrible virus. We have seen the destructive power of Corona as a disease, and our heart go out to all the victims. But we are also witnesses to destructive use of Corona to spread lies, racism, bias, and conspiracy theories. But I want to take the word crown and use it in the sense of the Bible, in the sense of the Jewish tradition, to look forward to how we can use this time as a positive force. Corona, or keter in Hebrew, as we say in Hebrew, has a positive meaning. symbolizing power, leadership, and above all, honor. It is a very common motif in Jewish art and literature, and it is used to describe the power of God and the force that can be used for good and for bad too. I hope and pray that with God's help, the scourge of Corona will disappear as speedily as it came. And in Ethics of Fathers, chapter 4, verse 13, Rabbi Shimon said there is three varieties of crowns. The crown of Torah, of our Lord, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But the crown of a good name supersedes them all. It is our job, therefore, as media professionals, as journalists, to ensure that the good name of our profession is protected, to search for and report the truth or what we hear and see, to use the word corona to find honesty and integrity for our future. I'm happy to be able to welcome you here outside the Friends of Zion Museum, the founder Mike Evans and all his staff. Thank you very much. And we really appreciate that you are cleared your schedule in these uncertain times to join us together here in Jerusalem. We have packed a schedule for you tonight. We don't have 4 days as we normally have in the Christian Media Summit, but perhaps in the next 4 hours, a little bit less, we'll be able to get glimpse behind the scenes of a recent events, adding yet another dimension of our relationship and finding the jewel in the crown for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nitsan Chen. And now we have special greetings from the President, Mr. Reuven Ruvi Rivlin.
Dear friends from the Christian media around the world, Shalom. Shalom to all of you from Jerusalem, the city of peace. This year we have been forced to stay apart due to the COVID, although in our hearts we feel closer than ever. However, this has also been a year of peace. The historic Abraham Accord signed by Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain can provide a model of peaceful coexistence between all people and religions in our region and around the world. Unfortunately, the challenges in our region have not disappeared. Iran continues to advance in its nuclear program and spread terror and destruction, and Palestinian terrorists have fired rockets at Israeli cities time and time again. Israel will continue to do all that is necessary to defend its citizens and to seek peace and cooperation with our neighbors. I look forward welcoming you back soon to the Holy Land, and I'm happy to share with you that we have made great progress in developing the Qasr al-Yahud site, the site where Jesus was baptized, and the entire land of monasteries area on the river Jordan. This project not only has great religious significance, but also has great potential for promoting cooperation between Israel and our Palestinian neighbors and our Jordanian neighbors. Friends, I want to thank you all for all that you are doing for Israel during these difficult times. Thank you for all that you do to spread the truth about Israel and to speak up for peace. Thank you. As we say in Hebrew, Toda Rabba, and God bless all of you.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was touching. And now, as we all know, the Abraham Accords are a major achievement by our Prime Minister. After a long period of non-stop efforts, the historical peace has been achieved. So let's give applause to our Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's a pleasure to join you at this 2020 Christian Media Summit. Usually I would be meeting with you face to face, but this year the coronavirus has forced us to meet digitally. But still a real pleasure to address you from Jerusalem, because I know that Israel has no better friends than our Christian friends around the world. And your friendship and support is greatly appreciated, enormously appreciated. Since I spoke with you last, so much has happened. Most importantly, Israel signed peace agreements with 2 Arab countries, with the Emirates and with Bahrain. It was the first time Israel signed a peace treaty with an Arab country in over a quarter century. And it was the first time ever that Israel signed agreements with 2 Arab countries on the very same day. These new agreements will not only bring us the blessings of peace, but they will bring us also the tangible benefits that will flow from new cooperation in trade, in commerce, in investment, innovation, transportation, tourism, and so much more. I think this is a remarkable hinge of history. It speaks also to the legitimacy of the Jewish state. I went to Washington to sign these historic agreements with the representatives of the Emirates and Bahrain and with President Trump, President of the United States. But I didn't do so by sacrificing our patrimony or jeopardizing our security. I did this as a proud citizen of Israel, as a proud son of the Jewish people that protects our patrimony and our security. And I think this is a change because it marks really for the first time the full acceptance of Israel's legitimacy here. This is something I need not tell you about. If anyone has been there all along through thick and thin, it's you. You have understood the historical imperative, this great odyssey of the Jewish people coming back to their land, building up their state, rebuilding their capacity to create and defend their present and their future. And in this, I want to tell you, my friends, you've been extraordinary. You've been extraordinary friends, extraordinary champions of the rights of the Jewish people and the land of Israel, and extraordinary champions of the truth. So keep raising the torch of truth, because sooner or later, everybody will see it.
Thank you, Prime Minister Netanyahu. That was powerful as always. Our host here tonight is Dr. Mike Evans, a true friend of the GPO and the State of Israel. Dr. Evans constantly works to help Israel and the Jewish people. Joining us live from the United States, Dr. Evans, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Israel's outstanding Global Christian Media Summit. This is the 4th in a row, and it's touching the world. So important because the new wars of the 21st century are in fact media wars. They're economic wars, they're ideological wars, and they're proxy wars. And there's no group of people that have been a greater supporter of the State of Israel than the Christian media associations throughout the world. They're all pro-Israel. They all combat anti-Semitism. They're your greatest friends, and I honor you and I thank you for being part of that. And we are here at the Friends of Zion Media Center, the most advanced media center in the State of Israel. By the way, when the Holocaust Forum was held, President Putin based all of his media out of this media center. This is a special day for me as the founder of Friends of Zion. The late President Shimon Peres, the 9th president of Israel, was our international chairman, and he also commissioned the Friends of Zion Award. That award that I'm holding in my hands has been given to many world leaders, including President George W. Bush, President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and many, many world leaders. It's a very special award because it's symbolic of divine inspiration, and all of the people who received it have been friends of Israel. They've been people of moral clarity and courage. And today, you and I will have the rare opportunity of presenting the award to 2 kings, a prime minister, a crown prince, and 5 presidents. Many of you saw the Abrahamic Accords at the White House. I was there for that historic event with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Donald Trump. 2 countries made peace with Israel in one day. And I'd like to honor one of those nations right now, and the head of that nation, with the Friends of Zion Award, King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa of Bahrain. Congratulations, Your Majesty. What a courageous man you are. Thank you so much for having the courage to stand for moral clarity. We are so honored to present you with the Friends of Zion Award that we presented to the President of the United States. The second world leader we want to honor with the Friends of Zion Award is Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum of the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. These 2 amazing countries broke through the glass ceiling and make peace with the state of Israel. What an astonishing accomplishment on your part. Congratulations. Thank you so much. The third person that we want to honor is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. I want to take a moment to explain to you why we're honoring His Excellency the Crown Prince. There is no leader in the Muslim world that has influenced the decisions that are being made to move the Muslim world to support the state of Israel more than this Crown Prince. He may not be taking the credit for it, but I can tell you, having met with him, he is, in fact, the key person that's leading. What I saw in the country under his leadership was astonishing. A total re-education program against anti-Semitism, including in the mosques, among the mullahs. They don't allow them to preach jihad and Jew hatred anymore. But in addition to that, I learned a lot when I was with the Crown Prince. He told me he understands Jewish people because his mother was Jewish. Well, he told me it was really his father's house director, and she was an Ethiopian Jew. He also told me his personal feelings about Israel, and he said the Palestinians have a simple solution. They need to copy Israel. They need to copy Israel. He was very impressed with Israel and not so impressed with the corruption among the Palestinians. Keep your eyes on this Crown Prince. He's one of the most brilliant men living on the planet, one of the most articulate, and one of the most forward thinkers. I can tell you virtually everything that's moving forward in the Sunni world, I believe, is because of his leadership. And that's why we want to honor the Crown Prince with the Friends of Zion Award. The fourth world leader we want to honor with the Friends of Zion Award is King Mohammed VI of Morocco. Keep your eyes on Morocco. Morocco will also make peace with Israel. They're very forward-thinking, and they're very well engaged in this matter. So we want to honor them now. The next leader we want to honor with the Friends of Zion Award is the President of Serbia, Alexander Vučić. They are also moving forward in the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The next world leader we want to honor is the President of Romania, Klaus Iohannis. Again, another country that will move their embassy to Jerusalem. The next world leader we want to honor is the president of Paraguay, President Mario Abdo Benitez. The next world leader we want to honor is the president of Czechoslovakia, President Miloš Zeman. The next world leader we want to honor is the president of Malawi, an evangelical who is going to be moving the embassy also to Jerusalem, President Lazarus Jakarwa. And the next world leader we want to honor is my old friend, His Excellency, President Museveni of Uganda. This president is very special to me because I was asked by Maureen Reagan Revelle to open up the U.S. for him when he became president on the 29th of January, 1986. The doors were shut because of Idi Amin. And I did. I brought him to the National Religious Broadcasters Conference. I hosted his cabinet in the suite, and it was a wonderful time. By the way, he said to me at the time, "What can I do for you for what you've done for me?" I said, "Just one thing, Mr. President. Honor Yoni Netanyahu, the brother of Benjamin Netanyahu. Honor him at the Entebbe airport." He said, "I'll do it." Well, heavens, 20, 30 years went by. It didn't happen. And he came to Jerusalem with his wife, Grace, at the future conference of President Shimon Peres. And I went up to Grace and I said, "Grace," by the way, they're wonderful Christians, "Grace, your husband made a promise to me, and he broke his promise. He did not honor Yoni Netanyahu." She looked at me and she said, "Man of God, God will strike my husband with leprosy if he doesn't keep his promise here in Jerusalem." Oh, that's what she said. Well, within 24 hours, President Museveni was with Prime Minister Netanyahu, acknowledging he was going to build a memorial to honor Yoni Netanyahu. And he did it. President Museveni, I know you, and I know you're an evangelical, and I know your darling wife, and I'm so glad you don't have leprosy. Thank you for your support of the State of Israel. I know you'll move the embassy, and God will bless you for doing that. And I bless you. I'd like to express my congratulations to my dear friend, the director of Israel's press office, Nitsan. You have been terrific to work with. And what a complicated situation you were in, hosting something like this virtual in the middle of Corona. But only you could have accomplished it. And it's an honor to partner with you. And by the way, I'd like to thank our Jerusalem prayer team members. We have 71 million followers just on Facebook. It's the largest pro-Israel social network site on the planet. And it's growing very fast. We expect to hit over 100 million in a matter of months. So Jerusalem prayer team members, thank you for your support and participating. By the way, just so you understand, the millennials of the world don't watch cable television. It's all social network. So our platform is reaching that amazing group of people in an astonishing way. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Christian broadcasters. And thank you so much, State of Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, my 40-year cherished friend, for the astonishing partnership you've had with evangelicals, Christian Zionists. God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. The Abraham Accords are a wonderful example of true sustainable peace and a beginning of a new amazing friendship. The next video will summarize the journey to peace.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا فخور وفرحان جدا بوجودي هنا كرئيس الوفد الإسرائيلي.
Just a very important event, and it's an honor to have you with us, baby. Thank you very much.
I thank you both for your wise leadership and for working with the United States and Israel to expand the circle of peace.
Prime Minister of the State of Israel, thank you for choosing peace.
Economic relationships between the Emirates, opportunities for innovation and science, travel between these two places will now be open. And that's important. That's important to create between Israel and this Arab state this opportunity.
This was the first peace treaty between Israel and an Arab country in over a quarter of a century.
Such amazing times, and now I want to invite and say hello to Mr. Eliav Benjamin, Director of Coordinations and Special Relations Countries at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Hello, good evening.
Hi Ritar, good evening to you too. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So let's just start and dive into the hot topic and this amazing peace agreements that all of us in Israel know that underneath the surface for many years Israel had relations with the United Arab Emirates, with other countries in that region. And what I want to start by asking you is, how come now? Why now the terms or the situation was okay for them to openly say we want to sign a peace agreement with Israel?
Well, Lital, it's true. We've had relations with most of these countries for over 20 years now. Some more, some less. Of course, everything was under the radar, things that the foreign ministry in Israel has been handling for years. And perhaps the reasoning is that all the stars are now aligned. Different things came into sequence, and this is the right time for so many reasons, whether it's the public opinion in so many ways that we've been working with and working on to understand the benefits of having relations, both here and of course in the Gulf. And add to that the interest of everybody and understanding of everybody to move on in the region, that this is the time to move on for relations, because it's for the best of peoples everywhere, for the benefit of the people, understanding that most of these countries are very tolerant countries. Israel is a tolerant country. The interfaith issue plays a big part of this as well. Both the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain see themselves, and rightly so, as a place for interfaith tolerance and dialogue. And these are part of the things that align together now.
I think in a way, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, it's a peace for peace. I mean, there are no demands from Israel. It's one country that says we can benefit a lot from signing a peace agreement with Israel, and we're proudly and openly saying that we want to have a close relations with Israel.
It's true. These countries who have said so for so many years behind closed doors are now saying so openly, understanding that the deadlock that we've all been in for so many years, we've all wasted so much time and so much blood and so many other things, and understanding that this is perhaps the best way to go forward for the region, and hopefully it will have a rippling effect on other countries as well.
Do you think that the elections in the United States or the timing has to do with the timing of the signing of the peace agreements? As President Donald Trump said, he wants to show to the world that he's a good businessman, that he can bring peace agreements, and it was a bit more difficult to bring a peace agreement with the Palestinians, so that was a good opportunity to deliver.
Well, I think a good word of gratitude, a big word of gratitude, is owed to the Trump administration, to the president himself, and to the people around him who've been working effortlessly for the past, well, since they came to office. It's not something that they started just now. They've been working on this really day in and day out for the past 4 years to make things happen and to make this into a reality where we are actually at today.
As today, actually this morning, we were witnessing the first official flight to Bahrain. What can you tell us about the relations between Israel and Bahrain, and what can we benefit from it?
Sure. Yes, another historical day. We are, a sequence of historical events now, first with UAE and now with Bahrain. A delegation went out on an El Al flight directly over Saudi. The Saudis approved this direct flight as well. The relations with Bahrain, which is a small country, surrounded also with various challenges in the region, and also allies on the other hand. They have a very small Jewish community there, believe it or not, which has been there for about 200 years or so.
Wow.
Very, very small but prominent, with a lot of respect that they receive from the leadership there. And there is really openness to do business with us, to come and visit us, to have cultural exchange, and goes vice versa as well.
As we know the close relations between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, we know that Saudi Arabia is allowing Israel these days to fly over its territory. Do you think that's a hint for the future, that maybe that's the next country that Israel is going to sign a peace agreement with?
Well, I'm not in the betting game to see who the next one will be. But we are working with a lot of countries in the region. You can, map out those that we haven't got the formal relations with yet. And yes, the fact that the Saudis allow for flights to go over them is great, and it definitely is a great signal for us, as we have also signaled in various ways to them that we are open for talks and cooperation.
Because we've heard President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that there are 5, maybe 6 countries allying to sign a peace agreement with Israel.
It's true. We're working effortlessly on this, really across the board. I mean, look at the countries, Muslim Arab countries, both in that region and also in the African continent, that we're working to try and form relations with, of course, the assistance of the United States.
Mr. Eliav Benjamin, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you very much.
Now, after hearing the Israeli side from the behind the scenes, it will be a perfect opportunity to hear the American side. So let us all thank the United States of America as we invite His Excellency Ambassador David Friedman.
Thank you to everyone at the Christian Media Summit. Thanks for having me. Thank you to my dear friend, Dr. Mike Evans, for hosting this event. It's a great pleasure to be with you, even if it's virtually. I'd like to share with you some personal feelings about 2 subjects, about the Abraham Accords and about COVID-19. What do these things have to do with each other? Well, I would suggest maybe more than you think. On September 15th, I was privileged to attend the signing ceremony of the Abraham Accords on the South Lawn of the White House. At that ceremony, the representatives of Bahrain, of the United Arab Emirates, and Israel all agreed to make peace with each other, to normalize their relations, and the document was signed and witnessed by President Trump. After the ceremony, I headed back to Israel, and I was immediately stuck in isolation. Those are the rules when you come back from a foreign trip. And so Rosh Hashanah I spent by myself with my prayer book and my family. And this was the next day, the day right after I got back from the signing. And I opened up the Torah reading for Rosh Hashanah. What was it about? It was about the story of Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac, from whom the Jewish nation descended, Ishmael, from whom the Arab nation descended. There was a great rivalry between Isaac and Ishmael in that section of the Torah reading. It hurt Abraham very much, but we do know that Isaac and Ishmael reconciled. They reconciled, and together they buried their father Abraham at the cave of Machpelah. So from a ceremony at which the nation of Israel and an Arab nation reconciled their differences. I went right into a biblical portion where essentially the first reconciliation between Jews and Arabs occurred. It was profoundly moving to me, and it told me something. It told me that there was a universal truth to the reconciliation among peoples. There's a universal benefit, a universal goal, commandment for people to make peace with each other. It is perhaps the highest form of human relations, to live together in peace. It doesn't happen as much as it should, but when it does, it's something to all be rejoiced, that all of us together can find peace and coexistence and joy and happiness in each other's lives. COVID-19, what has that taught us? To a certain extent, the same thing. What is this virus doing? It's infecting the entire world. There's no one immune. There's no one safe. There's no place to run. There's no country that has solved the problem. If you're infected with this disease, God forbid, you are just like everybody else, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you live in the East or the West. We're all in this together. It's the same notion. The people of the world have to live together. They have to live with each other. They have to coexist with each other. It is what God is telling us to do, whether in the story of Isaac and Ishmael, whether by bringing us to the Abraham Accords, whether by bringing us together to find common ground and a common cure to COVID-19. I pray that we're on this path. I pray that we find a cure to COVID-19, that this plague leaves us forever. We put this in the rearview mirror, never have to look back. But I hope that the lessons of the Abraham Accords and of COVID-19 stay with us forever. The lessons that we have to work as hard as we can to find peace and coexistence and mutual love and respect for each other. Let's hope that the year 2021, the year Tafshin Pei Aleph, is a year in which this is something that we accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, for your kind words and for your true commitment and friendship with the State of Israel. The COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world upside down, from a world of shaking hands and hugging to one of social distancing. This has led us to a virtual summit this year, joining virtual hands and efforts as we share knowledge of this horrible pandemic with each other, has gotten the world hoping to bring an end to this pandemic and to develop a vaccine which will hopefully prevent this pandemic from returning. In the midst of the pandemic, fake news and media bias have been involved. Part of our job as journalists is reporting facts and delivering truth and shaking fake news from the outlets it is spreading. The next panel will discuss exactly that. Moderating the panel is Mr. Chris Mitchell, head of CBN's branch in Israel. So let's get started.
Thank you, Lital. I appreciate that very much. And I also wanted to thank Nitsan Han and the GPO for hosting this 4th annual Christian Summit. I know I speak for Christians, journalists around the world, for the hard work you've put in to making this happen. And also a shout out and thanks to Mike Evans for hosting us in this amazing Friends of Zion Museum. And so I'll be hosting a panel on Israel and COVID, the peace deals that have been happening, and also the things that are happening as far as media bias, as Lital had just said. And on this panel is going to be myself, Chris Mitchell. I'm the bureau chief for CBN News and began the bureau back in 2000. It's part of CBN's long history in standing with Israel, begun by Pat Robertson and then followed him with Gordon Robertson, who has produced documentaries like In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem. And also Mayan Jaffe Huffman, a journalist with 25 years of experience. Mayan is the news editor and head of content online and strategy for the Jerusalem Post. And she's, by the way, done more reporting on COVID-19 here in Israel than almost anyone here. She's also a coronavirus consultant. We'll find out more about that pretty soon. Retired Brigadier General Amir Avivi. Amir is the founder and CEO of Apiti Hon Nestim, which means Protectors of Israel. He established that in early 2020, which proves that something good has come out of 2020. He's comprised of more than 1,000 high-ranking reserve and retired officers to promote the national security of the State of Israel for generations to come. Amir served 30 years in the Israel Defense Force and also was assistant to Israel's General Chief of Staff, Bughi Ayalon. And Joel Rosenberg is a New York Times best-selling author. He's sold millions of copies of his political and military thrillers. His latest is The Jerusalem Assassin, that one reviewer described as a taut, brilliant thriller ripped right from today's headlines. Rosenberg is masterful. The Jerusalem Assassin is an absolute home run. Joel also is the founder and editor-in-chief of All Israel News and All Arab News, just established in September 1st, which again proves that some good things have come out of 2020. And recently, Joel interviewed U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and attended the White House ceremony of the signing of the Abraham Accords. Before we start, just a little background on the panelists. Mayan, you've been a journalist for 25 years. Tell us why you're such a passionate journalist, why you stayed in the profession so long.
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. I mean, being a journalist is all about telling the truth, researching, sharing stories, and most importantly, learning and meeting people. And I think what has been the highlight of my last 25 years in the field has actually been getting to know some of the most incredible people across the spectrum, political spectrum, religious spectrum, across different fields, as I've been a general reporter up until today, where I had the privilege to interview and speak with some of the foremost health experts about the coronavirus and other health research that really helps to put Israel on the map.
Right. Amir, you're the head of the Protectors of Israel. I've looked at your website, and you have a stirring video there. It talks about Genesis 13:15, about the land of Israel. And I know you have a solemn and even sacred responsibility to pass on the Zionist ideal that you hold dear. You also said in that video that you feel like many Israelis have forgotten why they're here and forgotten the vision. What's the vision they've forgotten?
Well, it's very simple. It's the Jewish Zionist vision that says that this is the land of Israel and it belongs to the people of Israel. And we spent 2,000 years in exile, living in very, very bad situation with millions of people killed, pogroms, and so on. And finally, we came back to this wonderful land, to this safe haven, and we want to keep it safe. This is what we do.
Right. Joel, you said you started All Arab News and All Israel News. We'll talk more about that later and during Media Bias, but why did you start these two news sites?
Well, I've been joking, Chris, for a long time that I write fake news because I write political thrillers. So the idea of going back into journalism, I've certainly done written columns for over the years. But I am concerned, certainly as an Israeli, but also as an evangelical, from a Jewish background, that there's so much media bias. Some of it is soft bias. Reporters or editors who just don't understand or are interested in certain things that we care about as evangelicals. There are 600 million evangelicals around the world. Then there's hard bias, where they're actually, working against you. And then there's Al Jazeera, Turkish media, Iranian media, where they're actually at war with you. And it's a wide range, but I felt that we could do original coverage, provide original interviews, as well as linking to Mayan stories and CBN stories. There is good journalism out there, but we just need to drive it deeper into the Christian communities worldwide.
Yeah. First on the panel, we'll be talking about COVID-19. I think all of us have our individual personal stories about the disease. I got out of quarantine 4 days ago. Joel, you got out of bidud, which they call that in isolation or quarantine here in Hebrew, 4 hours ago.
Right, that's true.
And there are a few people, as I said, Mayan, that have really reported on COVID-19. How would you describe the way Israel has handled the virus since the beginning of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, it's a really interesting question if you start from the beginning of the pandemic, but then you take us till today. So in the first wave of the pandemic, I think Israel was incredibly successful, and I think everybody knows that, right? We shut down fast, we closed our airports, we put people into isolation, and we kept the number of people who were infected with the disease down and the number of people who died down. So we really looked like an amazing success story. But unfortunately, around May, that's where the success story started to end, because what we started to see was that as the government started to open up, remember, we formed a new government in May, and all of the new ministers were very excited to be popular with their constituents, and bing, bong, boom, and we opened everything up, whether it was people being able to travel in full on the buses, schools opening in full, theaters, cultural events in different outlines, and relatively quickly, actually, rather than slowly, we started to see a resurgence of the virus. Now remember, we didn't really have a first and a second wave and what will probably be a third wave in the winter. The virus stays with us from the beginning to the end. It's just a matter of how many cases are there, how active the virus is. When we lock down, when we cease from gathering, we see less cases. When we gather together, we see more. And so the government, after about a month or so, we had a problem, but it took us June, it really took a few months, July. Finally, in August, we hired Professor Ronnie Gamzu to be our coronavirus commissioner, and we thought, Messiah, this is the answer to all of our coronavirus prayers, and Gamzu came into office. But very quickly, he started to roll out what were epidemiological decisions, and again, politics took precedence over the pandemic, and we saw that to get his decisions made. And as a result of that, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into our traffic light program needing to get passed, it didn't come into fruition until it was really too late. And then when we needed to lock down the red zones, we didn't. And as you saw, we went into a second lockdown. We were the first country in the world to have a second lockdown. We became at some points first, other times third, but definitely always in the top 10 in terms of number of cases per capita per day, the number of deaths skyrocketed, and here we are today. Today is a special day because it is the first day of stage 1 of our exit from the lockdown that we just ensued for about a month, or a little over a month, I guess. And here we are. But stage 1 started with just our preschools going back to school, with small businesses, businesses that don't see customers opening, and a few other minor changes. But we're quite concerned. Today we saw that in the Haredi, in the ultra-Orthodox sector, we watched as tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of children between the ages of newborn to grade 8 went back to school, and with very little enforcement and very little control. So if the question is, how is the government doing? I mean, I'm an extreme Zionist and very pro-Israel, but I have to say I'm quite concerned with the way we're handling this pandemic.
Yeah, Amir, before I ask you a question, just to remind you, so many people here are joining us literally from all over the world on Zoom, and perhaps this fourth annual summit is reaching more people than actually the first 3 did. So welcome to everybody joining us on Zoom and around the world. Thanks for coming here on the Media Summit. Amir, to you, the impact on Israel has been profound. Perhaps $10 billion, even just the lockout. Tourism has lost maybe $3.5 billion. Businesses shut down. About 850,000 Israelis are out of work. From your background in the Israel Defense Forces, thinking strategically, how would you address the issue? And do you think the IDF should have been more involved, taken a more prominent role at the beginning of the pandemic, like many have made that point?
Well, one of the pillars of national security is the society's resilience. It's very, very important in such times of crisis that the people will come together and understand they have to join and fight and put all other arguments aside, politics and so on. Unfortunately, we see the society today divided, and this is very, very dangerous for the people of Israel. There is no way to effectively fight in such a crisis if people don't understand that they need to join, they need to put aside other issues and deal with COVID. Talking about the military, some people say the military should be responsible for everything. I think that, as you mentioned, because we're talking about economical issues and because we're talking about society and cultural issues and so on, it's the government that has to deal with it. But certainly, we need to take everything that the IDF can bring in. The IDF is very strong with lots of capabilities, and it should be involved as much as possible with the government dealing with the overall picture in this crisis.
Joel, you wrote an article called Israel's Second Yom Kippur War. You compared this to a war, and what did you mean in that article?
Yeah, that we're losing. We're losing the war. More Israelis have died from COVID, about 2,200 as we speak, than in all the wars and terrorist attacks in the last 20 years, which is about 1,441. That's a stunning number. And I think, these guys have, walked through why. We're Olim, we're new immigrants. We've only been in the country a few years. One son finished the army, one's in the Israeli army now. One of the things that we watched, and I'll just say it quickly, is that in the first lockdown, people took it seriously, and we were shocked because we don't think of Israelis being orderly and wearing their masks and standing in line and social distancing. So we were shocked. Then the second round, we sort of, that's the sort of Israel we think of. But we love Israel. We're super Zionists, like that's why we came from America. But I think what's interesting is, and my wife just captured it, the first time was a national emergency. People treated it like a war. So if the government says do this, they handled it really beautifully. Then they sort of lost confidence. And I will add, I think the government also got swept up in an annexation debate and got themselves focused on an entirely different issue, which was not helpful, combined with all the other issues of new cabinet members and et cetera. So yeah, we're losing this war, but maybe we're turning the corner, but we've got to be very careful going forward, particularly the Christians all over the world who want to come and visit. That's just one issue. We need to open up our country again, and it's sad to see it close. It's like a ghost town.
Just quickly, Mayan, Israel is the startup nation, and it has a lot of innovations about COVID. Just mention one. How is Israel doing on the race to a vaccine?
Well, it's interesting. I actually, just before coming here, had an off-the-record briefing about that particular topic. I can't share too much information, but what I can tell you is that we are, as everybody knows, getting ready to start our phase 1 clinical trial, meeting our first human trials of our vaccine that is being made by the Biological Institute in Leono. This is very exciting. And we are working concurrently to get access to various vaccines. We know about publicly Moderna that we've signed a contract with, Arcturus, and we're working behind the scenes on other commercial deals that will allow us to have access to a vaccine for Israeli citizens if it takes us too long or longer in order to achieve our own vaccine here. Keep in mind that Israel has never made a vaccine before. Even when we've come up with technologies, whether it's drug or vaccine technologies, we've shipped those outside and done trials outside the country. So this is a first here in Israel, and it's quite exciting. I know you asked only about vaccines, but I do think it is important to mention that Israel still is the startup nation. And while we talk about the failures that have happened on the government, the political challenges, lack of using the IDF, we have been able to come up with a number of treatments that are not solving the pandemic, as that's pretty clear, but certainly being able to treat our patients more effectively in hospital, whether it's finding innovative ways to use existing drugs or coming up with radiology treatments that are starting to help some patients at Sheba Medical Center, or the Kamada antibodies that we're using in conjunction with Hadassah Medical Center. There are many different protocols that are out there, and we should be very proud of that.
Right. Amir, as we finish up on COVID-19 in Israel, you're unashamedly Zionist. The Jewish Agency says in the next 5 years there may be 250,000 Olim, a dramatic increase of Jews coming back to the Promised Land. Do you see that as maybe a silver lining here in COVID-19 for Israel?
Well, definitely. That's one of the reasons, by the way, you need sovereignty in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. We need space for so many Jews that are going to make Aliyah. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is terrible in Europe. It's also terrible in the United States. I frankly think that Jews are going to encounter a very, very hard future. And this is why it's so important that the state of Israel will be strong, will flourish, will be ready to absorb any amount of Jews that want to make Aliyah. This is the difference between the history in the past, where there was nowhere to flee, and the existence of the state of Israel. This is so important, and we're really looking forward for all these Jews to come to Israel.
Yeah. As we shift to our second topic about the peace deals, and we just want to again say thank you to everyone joining us from Zoom. Shalom from Jerusalem. Joel, as we speak right now, there are Israeli, U.S., and Bahraini officials signing a memorandum of understanding in Bahrain right now. These Abraham Accords are historic. You were there at the signing of the Abraham Accords at the White House lawn. Tell us about it.
It was incredibly emotional, I'll tell you, because I had been with Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed, 2 years ago. He invited me to bring a delegation of American evangelical leaders. I wear both hats as an Israeli and as a dual U.S. citizen, since that's where I was born and raised. And I brought them in, and one of the things we talk about when we meet with these Arab leaders, I've led 6 of these delegations, is, you know, we are, as evangelicals, we love Israel and we love the Jewish people. And that's a theological position. It's not a political position, so it can't be changed. So we just want you to know, as an Arab Muslim leader, you just need to understand the evangelical community. The UAE had never invited such a delegation before. We also said we are followers of Jesus, so we also love our neighbors. We're commanded to. We don't always know how. We're not against the Palestinians. We want to make peace with them, but we're not quite sure how. But we want you to know it's not either or for us. But the third thing I said was, we are commanded in the scriptures, Psalm 122, verse 6, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And we've been praying for a long time for another Arab leader to say yes and make peace. And we just, want to encourage you. And he leaned forward. He said, Joel, I'm ready. I'm ready. And we were shocked, because that was sort of a, not boilerplate position, but just, we weren't expecting that answer. And we spent a lot of time. It was off the record at the time. And we had also met with his younger brother, ABZ, Abdullah bin Zayed, and that's the foreign minister. So to be on the lawn of the White House, watching Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed sign a deal with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, whom I worked with 20 years ago, but still, and the Bahrainis, who I know as well, it was stunning. And I was emotional, again, having sons that have served, one still is. You just think, this is really happening. And the media bias is that they feels barely covered outside this region, but still, it's an historic, game-changing deal.
Yeah. Amir, before I get to you, I wanted to ask Mayan a question. We were talking before this, Mayan, about the panel, and we found out that we both came here in the year 2000. That was the year, the beginning of the Second Intifada. I wanted to ask you, looking back 20 years, can you imagine what's happening now? Then, even 5 years ago, could you have imagined it?
I don't think that even 5 years ago we could have imagined this, but I also think that what we've seen over the last 20 years is a real shift in the dynamic of the Palestinians. And I would actually argue that's really happened in the last 4 years since President Trump came into office. When President Obama left office, the Palestinians, in terms of rhetoric, had the upper hand. I'm not saying in terms of any dialogue, but in terms of how it appeared in the public square, they were winning the battle. But what we've seen happen in the last 4 years, and again from President Trump and the way that he's brought it onto the scene, but also because of dynamics that we talked about with the evangelical Christians working behind the scenes with the Arab nations wanting to prosper and to have contact with Israel so that they can be a part of or tap into the startup nation. We've seen the floor change, and what we're starting to see is that people aren't voting necessarily for the Palestinians, even though we of course want peace and we want to see everybody work together, but they're starting to say that there are bigger issues. I would add to that, and everything always comes back to coronavirus, that coronavirus has had a certain impact on that as well. When we get struck with a global pandemic and everybody is struggling in their own countries, looking inwards with what they need to do in order to not beat the pandemic, but at least succeed and to live through the pandemic. So we start to see who could be our best partners and who's getting it right and who can help us. And I think that we start to also reflect on what is important in life. And you see that different countries, especially in the Gulf states, but all over the world, are starting to look at partners they didn't look at before in order to beat this thing together.
Yeah. Amir, just the other day, the Knesset ratified the accords 80-13. Israelis seem to have a majority seem to support it. Our crowd, Jonathan Medved, sees a great opportunity for trade. Jerusalem's Deputy Mayor, Flor Hassan, whom was just there, is very excited about the relationship. As a retired Israeli general, what is your view of the Abraham Accords?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to be very, very beneficial for Israel, especially talking about economics, especially because now there is a real interest between us and the Sunni Arab world, and it's dealing with the Iranian threat. This interest emerged something like 8, even 10 years ago when the Obama administration actually left the Sunnis and joined with the Iranians. And the Sunni Arab world understood at this stage that the only country they can rely on is Israel, that will be always there in order to deal with the Iranian threat. Now, I'm not the kind of guy that gets all enthusiastic. I'm realistic. We have signed peace agreements in the past with the Iranians and with the Turks.
Oh boy.
And within time, it didn't necessarily turn out so well. So I'm happy about these peace agreements, but I want to say to the Israeli government, these peace agreements are important, but not if we don't apply sovereignty. Our interests are more important. We have to make sure that this peace agreement is not instead of fulfilling the most important interest of the Israeli people.
Yeah. One other question, Amir, you talked about sovereignty. You've wrote a couple of compelling articles in Israel Hayom about that, about sovereignty. One other question about qualitative military edge, which is called QME, which is applied by law by the U.S. Make sure that Israel has that qualitative military edge. There has been talk about the sale of an F-35 to the UAE. What's your sense about that?
Well, first of all, I understand the interest of the United States to sell. I also understand the Gulf states that want the best weaponry against the Iranians. But as you said, we have to keep Israel's edge. So we are going to discuss this issue with the administration, with the Congress. And if at the end of the day they will sell the planes, we have to make sure that the technology inside them is not cutting edge, and still we have enough edge to keep our power in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, turning to our last topic, and maybe we have time to get to one more. If you haven't heard, there's a national election in the U.S., and we wonder how that might impact the Middle East and Israel. Mayan, you've been in journalism for 25 years. How have you seen media bias against Israel? And in particular, how has it raised its head there in social media?
Look, media bias against Israel has existed, I think, for time immemorial. Anti-Semitism has existed longer than that, and we don't expect anything different. But in terms of what's happened, really, in the last 8 months under the coronavirus, is that it's become rather acute. We're seeing a spike in anti-Semitism on the social networks before COVID-19. We were writing about that, exploring that, whether it was through various reports or through just articles, looking at what was happening on the social networks. We were seeing this happening especially in sort of what we call fringe social networks that are not Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, but are these side groups, these gaming platforms, where people were using them in order to spread a lot of anti-Semitic messages. Here comes coronavirus, COVID-19, and of course you need to blame somebody. So there became a lot of conspiracy theories, not just against the Jews, not just against Israel, but certainly as well. And we saw an even greater increase in this. Now, what has happened today versus, let's say, what happened 25 years ago? Look, when I started in journalism 25 years ago, we didn't really even have a website for our newspaper where I was working at the time. I started on the internet desk at the Jerusalem Post when it was first starting, and that was about 18 years ago. So here we are today, and that is the main platform that people use, and social networks are how people access that web content more often than not. And so what we're seeing is that this one piece of misinformation, one piece of fake news or biased news is one match that creates a fire in seconds. And this has become a really big problem. First of all, in terms of health experts being able to combat the fake news, don't wear a mask, do wear a mask, what's correct, who's behind those conspiracy theories, and certainly when it comes to Israel or the Jews being behind some of this, it's equally as much of a problem.
Yeah. Joel, as we mentioned, you started 2 news sites, All Israel News and All Arab News. What do you hope to achieve in light of media bias against Israel with these websites?
Yeah, well, we want to go to war to counter all this type of media bias, and particularly from the lens or the perspective of the evangelical Christian community. which again is 600 million strong worldwide, about 60 million in the United States. That doesn't mean every article has a Bible verse or is, or is covering Christians, but it is dealing with a lot more issues than maybe other media sites do, and linking to those sites that are doing really good coverage that's unique and helpful. But I will say it's a war. Mike Evans mentioned that. We're in the media center of the Friends of Zion Museum. Is a high-tech center. It's a great center. This is a war, and we have to treat it on many fronts. And you can't just play defense. You have to play offense. You have to engage certainly your own communities. And I would say overall, and this is the aside from the Christian Broadcasting Network, who I think is leading the league in trying to figure out how do you drive good, solid reporting to the Christian community worldwide. But I think social media is an area that a lot of Christian media isn't doing enough of, and that's an opportunity, not to compete, but to work together. Again, just like we need allies in the Sunni Arab world, and certainly the United States is our most important ally, Christian media, Jewish media need allies. We need to be encouraging and strengthening each other, because you can't wage the war alone. Israel is small, the Jewish community worldwide is small, and when they were fighting by themselves, it wasn't going so well. And unfortunately, the Christian community worldwide was dormant at very bad moments. And a lot of what we're trying to do is flip the tables and do it differently. And that's why, even though my day job is political thriller writer and starting nonprofits to do humanitarian relief in Israel and so forth, I can't let this battlefield go unengaged. So all Israel news and all Arab news is the answer for me. And the reason we had to do all Arab news was because there are Arabs who are friendly to Christians, to Jews, to Israel, but they're not ready to go be interviewed by me, a Jewish evangelical Israeli Zionist. If I had it on all Israel news. But they are doing it. Some of the leading Muslim leaders in the world are willing to talk to me, even serve on our advisory board, as long as there's a different site. And that's all Arab news. So, yeah.
And I think that would be a message to all us watching on Zoom. Those are going to be watching this the re-air. And so check out all Arab news, all Israel news. Check out Protectors of Israel, Amir's website, and follow Mayan on Jerusalem Post.
And CBN News.
And CBN News, and Jerusalem Dateline. Amir, finally on media bias, have you experienced that directly?
Well, sure. I mean, Protectors of Israel, we write a lot of articles. I think we are quite good writers, some of us.
Okay.
And I've sent some very serious articles, for example, to Yediot Achronot, and they said very clearly, we don't like your views, although I would say they are completely ordinary Zionistic views that practically were shared by both right and left wing in Israel for generations. And when they don't like the view, they simply don't publish. So we get published mostly in right-wing inclined media.
Right.
We're willing to publish you, General.
Great. I appreciate that. Thanks.
That's right.
Absolutely.
We have 1 minute left, 15 seconds. There's a national election. What impact will the U.S. elections have on Israel? Joel, then Amir, and Mayan.
Wow. Well, if you just look at the Israeli polls, I think they're telling us what I think a lot of us instinctually know, and that is that President Trump has about a 2-to-1 margin lead here in Israel over Vice President Biden. And that's specifically because of all the actions that President Trump has taken, moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing that Israel has sovereign rights over Golan Heights, obviously helping us make peace with our Arab neighbors. But I will say it's also that the previous administration, led in part by Joe Biden, moved towards Iran and made an insane nuclear deal with Iran that threatened not only Israel, but our Arab allies as well.
Yeah. Amir?
I think President Trump is the greatest friend Israel has had in the White House. And for us, it's we're looking at the elections, and we really want President Trump to win again, and I hope many people go out and vote. I think that if it will be Biden, it will be a completely different policy, and we are thinking how to get ready to, if it happens.
Brace for impact.
Mayan.
Well, I hate to be the more balanced of the group here, but I guess I have to say that a Biden win or a Trump win will both have advantages and disadvantages for the state of Israel. Since President Trump has come into office, he's done incredible things for the state of Israel. We know that. There's also been a big surge of anti-Semitism in the United States and other challenges, and it's hard to say exactly where that stems from. Biden, while he did work with President Obama, obviously in office, has always been a friend of Netanyahu and has a lot of pro-Israel values. We also just saw in recent polls that while Israelis, though they don't vote in the American election, would prefer a President Trump win, Jewish Americans would prefer a Biden win, and therefore there is a bit of a gap there as well. Yeah. So I think that Israelis shouldn't really or can't really decide the American election, but I would be hopeful that as Israel has always been a bipartisan issue, that it will stay a bipartisan issue, regardless of who wins the presidency next month.
Right. Well, Joe Rosenberg, Amir Avivi, Mayan, Jeffy Huffman, thanks for joining us. And thank you for joining us on Zoom around the world. Appreciate it, coming to the fourth annual Christian Media Summit. And Lital, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And thank you, members of the panel. This is a good opportunity to take a short break to listen to some beautiful music. Yonina is a musical duo. Yoni and Nina Tokayer. Actually, they're a couple in real life, and they've started their musical career alongside their personal life. So let's give it up. Yonina.
Thank you. We're so happy to be here singing to you here from Jerusalem.
And we're going to sing an original song. It's an original melody composed to the morning prayer, Elohai Neshama, which speaks about our soul being pure.
נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא, טהורה היא.
אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא, טהורה.
אתה בראתה, אתה יצרת, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, טהורה היא. אתה בראתה, אתה יצרת, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, טהורה היא, טהורה היא. אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה טהורה היא. אלוהי, נשמה שנתת בי, טהורה היא, טהורה היא. אתה בראתה, אתה יצרת, טהורה היא. אתה בראתה, אתה יצרת, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, טהורה היא, טהורה היא. אתה בראתה,
טהורה היא, אתה ואתה, אתה יצרת, ואתה משמרה בקרבי, טהורה היא, טהורה היא.
Wow, that was incredible. And we're going to hear a bit from Yonina in the upcoming minute, hour. Now we are ready to continue with our program. MK Sharen Askel is the chair of the lobby to promote relations with Christian communities worldwide. During her important job, MK Haskel works actively against the BDS movement and promotes Israel's image around the globe. We will proceed to MK Haskel's greeting. Please.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to the 4th Christian Media Summit. I was asked to speak about faith-based diplomacy. And one of the sentences that came through my head was that people who don't know their past, they have a poor present and they will continue to search their future in the darkness. We can learn so much from our past. And the Bible is one of the greatest history books that us, the Jewish people, the Christian people, have. It teaches us so much about our values that were passed on to us from generation to generation. Those revolutionary ideas that our heroes, that our ancestors have brought to life. And it doesn't matter if we go all the way back to Abraham, the first Jewish person that stood his ground, that thought on this crazy revolutionary idea on how to make his world better, his community better. He brought this crazy idea that his parents, his family, his community, the entire world was wrong. He told them that worshiping idols and statues, giving them food and their money, and sometimes sacrifice their life to them is absolutely wrong. He was the first person to tell them that there's only one God. You cannot see him. You don't need to give him your food or your money or your life. He only wants your love and your prayer. And obviously that revolutionary idea back in those times brought a lot of trouble to Abraham. Generation after generation, the Jewish people were persecuted for the simple, crazy, revolutionary idea, for that thought, for the monotheistic religion, until today, when we take it for granted, a monotheistic religion. We take it for granted, you know what, my entire community. They know God, they believe in God, they pray to God, but it wasn't easy all the time. And that's part of those values that generation after generation were given to us through our faith, through our Bible, through our history. And it doesn't matter if we go to Abraham all the way in the past, and we can go towards a few hundreds of years ago. And you know what? Israel is that same idea in today's days, in the present. Israel is this crazy revolutionary idea that we founded in the Middle East, a country that brings stability, that brings prosperity, an economy that is stable, that is prosper, that's bringing so much innovation and agriculture and so much more to the world. And it brings those values, the values of freedom, of liberty, of equality. And Israel is a proof that those values in the Middle East a very tough neighborhood is something that is possible. And if we go to times of peace and the things that we've learned from the Bible and from the history about times of peace, we understand that time after time when we stand our ground, this has always led the Jews towards peace. Like the prophecy said, although you have been forsaken and hated, with no one traveling through, will make you the everlasting pride and joy of all generation, in Isaiah. You know, after the war in 48, 19 years later, we've returned to our forefathers' land, to Shiloh, to Hebron. The most important thing, that we liberated Jerusalem, we unified it, we made it a place for all religions and all people to come to pray to together. An incredible vision of our future, that peace and that stability. We've created with two of biggest enemies that we've had. We had wars with Jordan and Egypt. We had bloody wars with them. And we signed peace agreements with them. Out of strength, the peace agreement with the UAE and Bahrain, that peace treaty is part of a big vision that comes from prophecies, from learning our history and our past, and part of our values. It's to create stability here. And only people with strong faith and strong belief can imagine something that no one else would have imagined in the past. Everybody talked about it as a dream. But because we understand our past, because we lived through the present, then we can push forwards toward there. We learn from our past and shape the vision of the future. Faith-based diplomacy unifies people. Faith-based diplomacy creates a clear vision about our future. Faith-based diplomacy comes from the heart with a deep commitment and an understanding that there is a greater good. We will share and we will write the history books together. That kind of diplomacy set a mutual ground rules for ideas, for values. When we share those mutual values of liberty, of freedom, of democracy, when we all share those ideas and the history that shaped all of our identity, we can create a clear vision of our future. We believe in create a future that will bring real peace and stability for the next generation, who will continue to carry our history and our values. I would like to thank all of our friends all around the world who support, work, and push those unbelievable ideas and vision, who only those with faith can turn it into a reality. Thank you very much.
And thank you, MK Haskell. As the global race for a vaccine continues, the Biological Institute in Israel is starting phase 3 in its clinical trials. If all goes well, in just a few months, Israel will be holding a blue and white vaccine. Leading the Israeli effort to find a vaccine, joining us live is Professor Shmuel Shapira, head of the Biological Institute. Professor Shapira, please join us.
Hi, nice being with you, nice talking to you. And just to correct, we are starting phase 1, but I'll explain in a while.
Okay.
First of all, what is our institute? The Israel Institute for Biological Research is a R&D research and development institute dealing with biological and chemical science, and its main issue is to protection for the people in Israel from biological or chemical warfare or terror acts. This is our R&D, and that's what we are doing on a daily basis. We weren't surprised from the pandemic. I started to direct this institute in 2013, And a couple of months later, I understood that one of the main issues that we have to prepare for is not a man attack, but a Mother Nature attack, and that we have to prepare for pandemic. And that's what we started, and I defined it as one of our main vectors for the IIBR, the Israel Institute for Biological Research. How do you prepare for something that you don't know? So we started our preparation for preparing for what we defined as unknown factor or factor X. And we started in two main directions. One is very applicable for the vaccine. The other one is diagnostic. We start to develop diagnostic platforms for unknown factor. It's much easier to diagnose or to prepare for something that you know, something that the hospital asks you, whether it's anthrax, whether it's smallpox, whether it's plague, but it's much more difficult to prepare for the diagnosis of the unknown. So that's what we were doing. This was one part. The other part that we started to prepare for rapid planning and manufacture of vaccine for something for factor X for the unknown. We started to develop animal models for the studies of such a vaccine when we'll have to develop it. We started to develop the facilities and the know-how for rapid mass manufacturing of such a vaccine in the case that we'll need it. And that's what we were doing for the last couple of years, and it's very good that we were doing it, because otherwise for this issue we were starting like on elementary school, and this way we were starting like very high class of high school, college, or even graduates. So we were preparing slowly. We didn't have much support, because everyone think that pandemic, the last pandemic, big pandemic happened 2018 to 2020, which was the Spanish flu. But so why you do prepare for this? But we thought that this is part of our mission, and I'm glad that we were doing so. And December 2019, we started to understand that something weird is happening in China. Something weird is happening in China, some form of outbreak. We didn't know exactly what's happening, but we were just open our ears, we opened our eyes, we were attentive, and more evidence appeared. We start to gather data, to take off the dust of some of our contingency plans, and we were doing it. And we were doing it for the last week of December, all over January. And then on the 2nd of February, I was called to the Prime Minister, Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. I was called for a meeting. They called me Saturday evening, and the meeting was scheduled for Sunday noon. And the topic of the meeting was preparedness of vaccine and antibodies, on which I'll be talking in a while, for the people of Israel. I call my staff. I'm a very early morning, but some of my staff get later. I call an early staff meeting for 7 a.m. in the morning. Some of our senior biologists, some of our senior virologists, immunologists, and we started to form a very rough proposal for the meeting with the Prime Minister. And we have like two guns. One gun was for the planning and productions of vaccine. The other one was for the therapeutic antibodies. And I had a 2-page paper, blue paper, with which I came to the Prime Minister's office Sunday noon, the 2nd of February. I presented the plan very briefly to the Prime Minister, and he likes it, and he say go for it. And there was a written direction for the Israel Institute for Biological Research to manufacture vaccine, rapid manufacture of vaccine and therapeutic antibodies for the people of Israel. So we started by this. We start to work 24/7 during the weekends, during our Shabbat, during the Jewish holidays, even in Yom Kippur, which is the most kept Jewish holiday. Dozens of people were working in the IIBR and we were all target-oriented for the vaccine and for the IIBR. The process of manufacturing of vaccine, usually in regular times, it's a process that takes years. It's a very prolonged, very cautious process, and it's not something that you do in months. But we understand that we don't have years, we hardly have months, and we started to do it with support. We are governmental institute, but with excellent, that one of our main core values is excellency. And what we do, I say always, what we can do excellent, we are doing. What we can do very good, we consider what we are doing. And what we can do less than very good, we won't do. So we started to work on the excellent line. Very often staff meetings with scientists, with other people, and all the institute was backing up this process. It was backing up the process of the vaccine. It wasn't just in the head of the biologists, or the chemists did whatever they want, the physicists did whatever they want, the mathematicians, they gave their contributions, and all the supporting staff. And now, about 9 months later, it's by chance, it's a time of gestation. After a good, healthy gestation, not simple. It's like the Beatles' old song, "The Long and Winding Road." So it was a long and winding road, but we holding a vaccine, and we just this day we start experimenting on humans. So what we were doing, I'll start a little bit from the beginning. The first thing to do was to get the vaccine, to get the virus. Now we have plenty of the virus because we are also doing diagnostic tests, but the first day it was not simple to get the virus, and the first viruses we get from passengers, Israeli passengers that arrived from the cruise with the Princess Diamond. So we got the virus. Till then, the first day till we got the virus, we can work by what the Chinese publicized regarding the transcript of the virus. But we needed to work. We need the real virus, and we had it after a couple of days that the first patient arrived to Israel. There are a few strategies to manufacture vaccine, and we choose among the two, and we have experience with manufacturing in the past therapeutic vaccines, so we weren't a novice in this, and we had to choose among few strategies. And we choose something that is modern, but slightly conservative. We didn't go like Moderna or anything for RNA vaccine, which is a very courageous idea, but there's no RNA vaccine as for now in the world. So we were going for something more conservative. We didn't go to old-fashioned one like dead viruses, which is a very old-fashioned way. So we choose something in between. And I tell you what we chose. This is, if you see this, you see my finger pointing to, now everyone knows this is the coronavirus with the red spikes. We use a platform. The platform that we use is another type of virus. It's a VSV virus that called VSV, vesicular syncytial virus. It's a virus that doesn't cause any harm to people. This is the virus that serves as a platform for the Ebola vaccine, and it has been tried already on 300,000 people all over the world. So we took a platform which is known, the VSV platform, and on this platform, we put the spikes from the corona. So this is now the VSV virus with the spikes of the corona. And this is the principle. This is the vaccine. You inject it to the human being. You inject it to the human being, and the immunological system of the person sees it as if it is exposed to the corona, but it doesn't cause the harm of the corona because, as I said, that the virus is harmless. And if you look at the button, if you can see details, this is the electron microscope. You see the VSV virus at the beginning. It looks like a bullet or anything, and the black spots are the spike of the VSV vaccine. So this is what we chose. This is what we chose as a platform for the vaccine, and we did it. Now, for the next thing, we have to choose animal models, because certainly you have to try it on animals before you start it on people, both for efficacy and for safety. So the first model that we chose and we gamble, and it's not a regular animal model, it's the hamster model. This is one. Later on, we used also swine, we use mice, and we use rabbits. The mice that we used, they were engineered to carry human antigens, the famous ACE receptor, and we choose. Okay. Okay, so we choose it, we examine it on 4 other species of animals, we measure efficacy, we measure safety, and now we are going to human. If you ask me if our small institute succeed in what big firms failed, I'll say that it's few things. I think it's leadership, I'll say it's teamwork, I say it's excellency, I say dedication, I say it's vast scientific knowledge, innovation and flexibility. And by this, I'll just conclude a very short speech on a very complex and very fascinating subject. I'm waiting for questions.
Thank you, Professor Shapira. We have now a couple of questions from a few of the audience. Ari Bussell from Los Angeles, please ask your question.
I don't hear him.
Ari?
I don't hear.
Okay, so we're going to bring up Ari right now, and he will ask his question in a moment.
Okay, thank you very much, and shalom from Los Angeles. Professor Shapira,
shalom.
How are you getting, 2 questions if I may. You once used to be the top secret installation in Israel, and here you're sharing information with us. It's extraordinary. Can you tell us, please, based on the fight against Ebola and coronavirus, this is not the first coronavirus. Are you planning for the day after? Because surely there will be more such viruses.
Yeah. We have seen 5 pandemics in the 20th century, in the last 100 years, I would say. The first was the Spanish flu, there was on the middle way, there was the SARS, there was the AIDS. It was the SARS, it was the AIDS, there were few pandemics, and pandemics will come. There is clash between urban building, between civilizations and nature. And this brings us pandemics, and this is it's part of the mission. And I think this a main part is to protect the people of Israel. It doesn't matter if it's an enemy threat or if it's a Mother Nature threat. So some people say that the biggest bioterrorist is Mother Nature. So we see it. It's a huge event that influenced the life of all the world. First of all, of course, the health, it influenced the economic.
Thank you, Professor Shapira. We're just short on time, so we would like to ask one more question. We have a question from Michael Ordman. Michael Ordman would like to ask one more question.
No. Yes, Professor, will the vaccine be safe for people who have got compromised immune systems?
It's too early to say, but I think it is, and I think it will be a necessity even for people with immunocompromised systems, because this will have to check. The only question, because it's a live vaccine, is something that has to be considered. I think it's too early to say, but maybe there will be a need for another choice. But as for now, it seems that it will be okay. But I think it's I don't want to focus that far.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Shapira.
Thank you, and good speaking to you.
Do we have one more last question from anyone? I think that's it. I think we don't have any other questions. Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Shapira, for being with us today.
Thank you, and take care.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. We really hope to see an Israeli vaccine soon. We are all talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, but aside from this news-packed topic, terrorism still remains on our surface. In its many disguises, we can also find terrorism in the shape of human rights groups, making Aliyah from Serbia, a country which recently moved their embassy to Jerusalem. Ms. Olga Deutsch, Vice President of NGO Monitor, will talk to us about this important subject. Ms. Deutsch, please.
Or good morning, wherever you are. It's such a pleasure to be here and at least virtually know that so many of you have gathered today to celebrate this year's Christian Media Summit. It is a pleasure and an honor to address you and shed a little bit more light on what NGO Monitor, a Jerusalem-based institute, is all about and what we are active on. We are in a celebratory mode despite the COVID pandemic and crisis, which has crippled our work of all of us globally, but nevertheless in a celebratory mode over the deals of the century, the normalization agreements and peace treaties that are being signed in the last couple of months. It is nothing less but a historic moment to witness and be an activist in the lines of the civil society when Israel gets to sign a normalization deal with a major Arab country. But there is still room for worry or skepticism. Only a few days ago, the Palestinian Authority's head of section for civil society, NGO affairs, in a media article announced that exactly in the spirit of the deals of the century and normalization between the ties, normalization of ties between Israel and the Arab countries, Palestinian civil organizations should be wary and careful not to fall into that trap, not to betray, and I quote, the Palestinian narrative and cause. What does this mean? Basically, the Palestinian Authority is calling their human rights and humanitarian NGOs, non-governmental organizations, not to sign any deals with donor governments, European, US, or any other, that are telling them a simple thing today. They're saying, if you want to promote human rights or be active in the field of the humanitarian aid, then you cannot have any ties with any terror elements. I guess we should pause for a second just to fathom, to try to understand the magnitude of this. Let me try to put this in a broader perspective. I'll take you a little bit over a year back to August 2019. A 17-year-old Israeli girl, Rina Schnerb, went on a stroll in woods with her father and her brother. But instead of enjoying the nature and nice weather, well, nice, it was very warm, it was August in Israel, an explosive was detonated by a Palestinian terrorist cell, and her father and brother were wounded, but unfortunately, Rina was murdered. She was only 17. It was an incredibly sad event. All the media covered it. And only a few weeks later, the Israeli security forces announced that they arrested a 50 terrorist cell affiliated to the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine, an EU, US, Canada, and obviously Israel designated terror organization. At least 5 of these 50 terrorists were senior officials, financial directors, managing directors of major Palestinian human rights and humanitarian organizations. Most of these organizations enjoy very generous support, financial, but not only by the EU, UN, other European governments, such as Germany, Belgium, Spain, and a multitude of church-based organizations, such as Dan Church in Denmark, the Norwegian Church Aid Organization, the Diakonia, the Swedish one. Only between 2011 and 2019, according to my research institutes, NGO Monitor, where I work, records, only the European Union has transferred more than 37 million euros to 10 projects promoted by a handful of organizations with clear ties, reported ties to EU-designated and US-designated terror organizations. A very dangerous situation in which we have a betrayal of Palestinian civil society. Instead of trying to build a sustainable society there and a democracy or provide humanitarian aid, we have the PA's nationalistic agenda that opposes any type of normalization with Israel being hijacking the civil society. And basically terrorist organizations such as the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine using the non-governmental organizations as a, call it a human rights branch. They have a political branch, they have a militant branch, and now over the past decade or so, they have developed a so-called human rights non-governmental organization branch. Let's talk a little bit about whether the European governments, the European Union and other governments have at all reacted to this. I mean, this is not a new thing. We at NGO Monitor have been recording and documenting the ties between these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and the terror organizations for over a decade now. And on so many occasions, we have publicly informed the European Union and governments. More often than not, the response from them was that there was no sufficient evidence and our claims were dismissed. Until this year. In July this year, the Dutch government froze its funding to one of these Palestinian organizations, the UAWC, Union of Agricultural Work Committees, because an internal investigation proved that Dutch taxpayer money went to salaries of the 2 of the terrorists who were in charge of murdering brutally Rina Schnerb. They followed with an announcement that there will be an independent investigation to see whether there was more room for more sanctions. This was a precedent because, as I said, until now, most of the governments would just simply dismiss charges of any connections between human rights and humanitarian groups and terror elements. A few months before, in May, after a very, very active public campaign by organizations such as ours and others, but also the elected officials, members of the European Parliament, in the meeting of the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, the European Union too announced that it will look into potential terror ties between Palestinian organizations that it funds and the EU-designated terror organizations. We are still waiting for the results, but the mere readiness to look into this is praiseworthy. How is this even possible? Can it be that the Dutch government or the German government or the European Union do not have policies in place that should prevent this, that should make sure that these kind of things, these kind of abuse of the public funds do not happen? Actually, the policies are in place. The EU has long had very clear regulations and requirements of the grantee organizations not to engage with any type of incitement to violence, let alone be active or engaged in terror activities. In 2019, the EU even introduces a new requirement in its contracts with the non-governmental organizations, demanding them not to employ or even work with third-party organizations who have amongst their lines individuals who are on the EU list of EU terror list. Surrounding this new requirement, actually, the PA and the Palestinian non-governmental organizations, the civil society, they open in a very, very aggressive campaign rejecting this new requirement and calling for the international community to revoke any type of funding conditionality, as they call it. Following this, and a lot of pressure from the Palestinian society, the EU representative to West Bank and Gaza actually issues a clarification letter telling the Palestinian civil society they should not be too worried because there are no Palestinian individuals on the EU terror list. This means that you have a situation that 4 or 5 Palestinian organizations are listed as terror organizations, but no individuals are attached to them, which already implies that there is a major challenge in how European governments are implementing these policies that seemingly exist. 6, at least, Palestinian organizations refuse to sign what they call an anti-terror clause, and all this is sparked by public announcements that at least 5 of the terrorists who were guilty of murdering young Rina Schnerb were NGO senior officials. The Palestinian Authority itself held a meeting last month calling for the Palestinian civil society to strategize on how to get the Palestinian organizations off the EU and other international terror lists. They see this as a national cause. And this doesn't come as a novelty. In 2007 already, the Palestinian representative or NGO organization, the Palestinian NGO network, as they call it, PNGO, refused to sign a major grant with the US aid over the same thing, as they call it, the anti-terror clause, which basically says we shall not engage with terror activities and we are free to sign this in order to enjoy your generous support. This is a very grave situation. The representative of the PEA in charge of the non-governmental organization sector that went public a few days ago on October the 12th and basically called for the Palestinian organizations not to succumb and not to sign any such conditions, linked this to the deals of the century, to the normalization deals with Arab states, between Arab states and Israel. He called it a betrayal of the Palestinian cause. And this is where we have to see the importance of this issue, and we have to act. We are witnessing a historic moment where a new Middle East is being created, and Israel is finally becoming a piece of that. And we are seeing readiness from so many to engage in a constructive dialogue. We don't have to agree on anything, but we have to be able to at least converse and talk about it. Well, at the same time, we have the Palestinian Authority completely hijacking not only that discourse, but also their human rights and humanitarian organizations and demanding them to toe the line with the Palestinian agenda of rejecting any type of normalization. We on our side at NGO Monitor see it as our job to look at the activities of these organizations and follow the trail of money, meaning we are the ones who know which grants are being given to which organization. Ours is to raise awareness and share facts about this. But this is where you might come into picture and we might do something together. Because it is not ours to turn to your elected officials and to your governments. That would be yours, because your taxpayer money, your public funds are being used to support these organizations, and instead of promoting good and developing a sustainable society on the Palestinian side, they're used for violent and terrorist activities that reject any type of normalization with Israel. We would be happy to share more facts on our research and hope that you will take it to your elected officials, to your media, to make sure that everyone knows that the trail of normalization and a new Middle East is not paved by violent narratives. Essentially, what are we talking about? We're not really asking of the Palestinian society anything that is not being asked by any of us. Do not reject violence, do not promote hate speech, do not ask for the murder of other people, do not hate Jews, do not promote anti-Semitism, do not reject normalization with Israel per se. We are ultimately asking of the Palestinian civil society to join the rest of the world, the rest of the civil society. And anyone who allows them anything less than that is actually betraying them and nothing else. I thank you very much for having me here and for joining us. This is so incredibly important to us to know that there is such an audience that is interested in our work, and we hope to be able to stay in touch with you in virtually under the circumstances in pushing for the rest of the world to know what is actually going on here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Deutsch. They're doing such an enormous job. Now to our next speaker. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Concreus is the international spokesperson of the IDF and head of international public affairs, public diplomacy, and social media. LTC Concreus has made many friends, some among us here today, participants of the summit over the years, and many friends from the Christian world as well. We have invited him here tonight to give us an important update as to Israel's ongoing security challenges across its borders. As we said earlier, terrorism does not stop in times of world pandemics. So let's give it up for Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Concreus. Hello, good evening.
Thank you, Lital. Good evening. And shalom and good evening or good morning, everybody, wherever you are. We are live from Jerusalem, and it is a pleasure to be with you all again. We recently finished celebrating the start of the Jewish New Year, and I want to wish you, on behalf of the IDF, a Shana Tova and Metuka, which is a good and sweet new year to come. This is my third time speaking at this summit, 2 years ago in Jerusalem, last year on the Golan Heights, and today back in the eternal capital of the Jewish people and the State of Israel, Jerusalem. While the venues may have changed, the threats that Israel faces remain a constant. Iran continues to seek ways to destabilize the entire region, extending its tentacles across the Levant. There is hardly a single country in our neighborhood that hasn't felt the adverse effects of the Iranian regime, as it paves a blood-soaked path on its jihadi quest for regional hegemony and to fulfill their ambitions for nuclear weapons. Iran has brazenly tried to attack Israel 6 times during the last 2 years, all of which were thwarted successfully by the IDF. As partner and proxy for Iran's ambitions is the Lebanese terrorist organization Hezbollah. Since their inception, they have attempted to murder Israeli civilians. But the IDF's defense of our people has been unyielding. Almost 2 years ago, the IDF launched Operation Northern Shield. It was the culmination of years of intelligence gathering. The aim of the operation was to expose and destroy Hezbollah's cross-border underground attack tunnels dug from civilian areas in Lebanon under the border into Israel. Over the course of a month and a half, we exposed 6 tunnels. Had Hezbollah succeeded in breaking through from even one of these tunnels, we can only imagine the magnitude of death and destruction that dozens, if not hundreds, of terrorists would have been able to wreak havoc upon Israeli civilians. Despite our successful operation, Hezbollah continues preparations to launch a surprise strike into northern Israel with the goal of seizing an Israeli community and raising their yellow flag for the world to see. But that is not all. Hezbollah is seeking to acquire game-changing weapons, what are known as precision-guided missiles, or PGMs. These are missiles that can accurately hit their targets within an error radius of only a few feet. Hezbollah has already announced which targets they intend to strike. They include the port of Ashdod, our offshore gas rig in the Mediterranean, the ammonium tank in the port of Haifa, and the runway of the Ben Gurion International Airport. A couple of weeks ago, we publicly announced and exposed the secret locations of several of these PGM manufacturing sites across Lebanon's capital, Beirut, purposely hidden among civilian areas. The supplies, parts, tools, machinery, and knowledge to undertake such work is being directly provided by Iran. Iran is sending convoys through war-torn Syria, which is being used as a bridge between Iran through Iraq, eventually to Lebanon. After being directly involved in destabilizing Syria, murdering hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children, Iran is seeking to entrench their military in Syria. From Syria, from this new outpost, they would intend to open a new battlefront from which to attack Israel. This attempted entrenchment and acquisition of PGMs represent an unacceptable reality for the IDF. The IDF has exposed their plans and will continue thwarting their malign ambitions against Israel and the region. But we're not the only targets here. Last December, a Hezbollah sleeper agent in New York City was sentenced to 40 years after spying for the terrorist organization and seeking American targets to attack on US soil. And to fund Hezbollah's illicit activities in the Middle East, they launder money and traffic illegal drugs in the US. They may shoot rockets and dig tunnels to harm Israel, but their terrorist activities know no borders. Unsurprisingly, though, there are only a few voices around the world holding Hezbollah to account, and we see the consequences on our northern border with Lebanon. While we are aligned with the aims and objectives of UNIFIL, the organization entrusted to ensure the stability along the Blue Line, Security Council Resolution 1701 is unfortunately not being implemented because Hezbollah denies the UN troops the freedom of movement, the ability to document, and the capacity to report reality on the ground. Regardless of the lacking UNIFIL ability to ensure stability and certain nations' refusal to label Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, the IDF remains vigilant against any threat and will continue to protect our sovereignty and safeguard the lives of Israeli citizens. The reality in the south mirrors the north. The terrorist organization Hamas that holds Gaza hostage abuses its international humanitarian funding to build terror tunnels and to attack Israeli citizens in the south. Against all these threats, we employed the doctrine called the campaign between wars, an approach that emphasizes deterrence and targeted military action to avoid major conflict. Today, we build upon this with the Momentum Doctrine, a paradigm-shifting procurement plan which revolutionizes the functions of the IDF and focuses on acquiring the most advanced weaponry and machines of war for the IDF. We also partner with our allies to strengthen our capabilities, including our closest ally, the United States Armed Forces. That includes the US Armed Forces, which undertakes F-35 exercises with us to ensure our aerial dominance and control. Our military-to-military relations have never been stronger, and it makes a difference on the ground and in the sky every day. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated the Jewish festival of Sukkot. During this holiday, we eat outside in makeshift huts as a reminder and tribute to our ancestors who crossed the desert from Egypt to Israel. Our ancestors fled persecution and enslavement. Their journey to the Promised Land was arduous, long, and dangerous. It is in their footsteps that we continue to build. From makeshift huts in the Sinai desert to one of the most advanced militaries in the world. It is that military edge which guarantees the freedom of our people, and your friendship which cements it. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Kornikus. Any question abroad from to Lieutenant Kornikus? Please, now is the time. Los Angeles, Chicago, where are you? So, at the meantime, can I ask you, did the COVID-19 pandemic have affect the IDF operations in the last few months? And if yes, in what way?
Our aim is to maintain operational capability and continuity, because we understand that we are the only organization in Israel that safeguards the state of Israel. So priority number one is to make sure that we have those capabilities. Priority number two is to assist the state of Israel in anything that the state of Israel needs. So since early March and until today, the IDF has had a growing role in assisting the state of Israel. We do everything from distributing food and medicine to the elderly and those in need. We manage COVID-19 hotels where people are taken from their homes in order to get healthy or to seek medical attention in special hotels that we have built for them. And now we are also part of the contact tracing program in Israel, where we assist the Ministry of Health in finding where the infected people are and cutting the chain of infection in Israel. And the last thing we've done, we just recently opened 2 wards, COVID-19 wards, inside an Israeli civilian hospital, and this will actually be the first time that Israeli military personnel treat not civilians in some faraway humanitarian mission like we've done many times around the world, in Haiti, in the US, in Mexico, and even Turkey and other places, but for the first time, Israeli military personnel will be treating Israeli civilians.
Including the doctors, including the nurse, all the equipment of IDF?
Indeed. All of the staff will be military personnel, and it's the first time. And it's not a very basic and easy task. It's not emergency medicine. It calls for specialized procedures and for knowledgeable staff that need to know exactly how to engage and how to treat the patients effectively. And I can tell you that we have raised the bar in terms of the quality of the medical attention that we're going to give, because after all, we're going to give it to our own civilians.
Wow. Okay, last question abroad. Where are you? Arlene Suarez, where are you? Please, ask your question. Hi.
I am Mr Nitsan. It's wonderful to hear one of your excellent briefings again. I want to know what particular methodologies might you be developing to deal with the balloon intifada in southern Israel, as well as particular things that you are doing to prevent the tunnels being dug into Israel. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Kornikus, please.
So what we're doing, thanks for that question. The situation in Gaza is a complex one where unfortunately Hamas holds more than 2 million Palestinian civilians hostage under their terrorist regime. And what they're doing is using everything at their disposal, civilian facilities and international aid, in order to build ways in order to strike Israel and kill Israeli civilians and to terrorize Israeli civilians. They go as low as using children's toys and balloons and attach IEDs, improvised explosive device, and incendiary devices and send them over the border. Against that threat, which fortunately, and I'm happy to say, it is not a life-threatening situation, but it is a weapon of terror against our Israeli civilians. We have used a multitude of different means. We've used laser beams, we've used drones, and we have even used other kinetic means as firing at the balloons and a few other things in order to cut the balloons in flight, and then when the payload lands in Israel, to immediately extinguish the fire or to expose of the explosives. But I can say that Israeli civilians, I think, are much more concerned about the threats posed by underground attack tunnels from Gaza into Israel. Against that, we've done a few things. I'll say 2 of them. One is that we are now have nearly completed almost 40 miles of a one-of-a-kind, single in the world, underground wall that runs many, many feet deep into the ground, actually as deep as necessary, and I can't say exactly how deep, but it runs many feet in the ground, and it is more than 3 feet thick, so that if tunnels try to go from Gaza under the border into Israel, they'll meet a hard obstacle. And on top of that, what we're doing is really loading the area with lots of sensors, so that if anybody is digging underground, we'll know about it, we'll know about it, and we'll be able to address that issue with different weapons at our disposal. The aim, eventually, is to make sure that Israeli civilians are first and foremost safe, and then, very importantly, that they feel safe in their homes as they sleep at night, and that we in the IDF do our jobs as in protecting them.
Colonel Kornikus, thank you so much. That was so insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good night, everybody.
And now we would like to take a second break and relax for a while with another special performances by Yonina. Let's welcome them back.
In my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it will all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more wars, and the children will play one day, one day, one day. One day, one day, one day, one day. It's not about win or lose, 'cause we are lose when they feed our souls of the innocent, blood-drenched pavement. Keep on moving, but the water's surging. In this space, you could lose your way, your way. It may drive you crazy, but don't let it phase you. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it will all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more wars, and the children will play one day, one day, one day. Change, treat people the same, stop with the violence, stop with the hate. One day we'll be free and proud to be under the same sun. Sing a song of freedom like
Thank you so much, Yonina. What a great song by Matisiyahu. I love him. That was wonderful. We will now proceed to our new next guest speaker. How does this pandemic affect other fields in our lives, such as culture and tourism? Will Israel and the world ever be the same again? How will the tourism industry look like in the post-corona world? Minister of Tourism Orit Farkas-Hakohen will now join us to talk about the Israeli vision for renewing the tourism industry. Minister Farkas-Hakohen, please.
Dear friends, I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, but sadly the streets outside my office are empty. A city usually full of color visitors from around the world, Jerusalem, like all of Israel, is another victim of COVID-19 shutdown. But despite this temporary break, we are here and we are waiting for the day the skies open and flights to the Holy Land resume. Israel's ties with the Christian world are unbreakable, not even by pandemic or an economic crisis. Visiting Israel, the Holy Land, is not just a visit or a vacation. It is a transformative, inspiring, and long-lasting experience. Coming here is a vacation beyond belief. We know that the many believers who visit Israel fall in love with the history of the land and the warmth of the people. Each Christian visitor, every tourist, spread the message about the need to visit Israel. Not one day, but now, as soon as possible and as many times as possible. In the past few years, Christian tourism to Israel has grown from many countries around the world. Millions of people in groups, families, and individuals toured Jerusalem, Nazareth, and the Sea of Galilee. These sites are ready, waiting for the visitors to return. During this forced break in tourism, Israel is renovating its relevant infrastructure so that future visits are better than before. When someone visits Israel, they support it in every way. They enhance its image, contribute to its economy, and make a statement that they care. After years of steady climb in Christian visitor, the COVID-19 crisis has forced us to take a break. But the temporary break is not the end. It is just time to breathe before visiting once again. We feel confident that once international travel resumes, we will be able to welcome millions of Christian travelers again. I look forward to that day. Shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you so much, Minister. Now moving to another side of tourism. The International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem is responsible for the Feast of Tabernacles, bringing hundreds of Christians from all over the globe to Israel every single year. So how do we make these summits happen in the COVID-19 times? Talking about the challenges and the successes of the Feast of Tabernacles, Dr. Jürgen Bohler, President of the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. Dr. Bohler, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much for the possibility to speak here today. Greetings to Mr. Nitsan and the Prime Minister's Office for organizing this amazing event, and not allowing COVID-19 to stop us for having the Christian Media Summit this year. Greetings also to my dear friend Mike Evans for this amazing, inspiring location here in Jerusalem. It's always a joy, Mike, to be at your place. I know you're watching, so many greetings to you also in the United States. And this year indeed was a very unusual year for the International Christian Embassy. The Christian Embassy had its 40th anniversary. That means 40 years since in September 1980, the founders of the ICJ established our ministry. And at the same time, it was a year where we wanted to have a big celebration. We had in January already record numbers registered for the Feast of Tabernacles. And we knew that we would have maybe 7,000 people joining us again for this year's Sukkot celebration. And then, of course, in March, the COVID-19 virus hit the whole world, and our plans were completely changed. And we had, I remember in February, an emergency meeting, and we discussed what are we going to do in the midst of this crisis. we have to cancel the feast. This will be a big shame because it's our anniversary. We understood also that many people from around the world already made preparation to visit the Holy Land and to celebrate with us. And we were, in a way, for maybe 1 or 2 weeks, we didn't know what to do, and we felt quite depressed. And of course, as a Christian organization, we did pray. And we have a great partner here in the land, which is the Sahel Media Group. And talking to them, we realized that we are living here in the land of Israel, in the land of high tech, in the land of the startup nations, in the land where you see a lot of new things being developed. And as we talked to some of those media people, they came to us and they said, Jürgen, why don't we celebrate this year's Feast of Tabernacles as an online conference where we are going to take Jerusalem to the nations when the nations cannot come to Jerusalem. Now, this was a roller coaster story because after the month of March, we thought there would be a physical feast because Israel was the best country in the world that was dealing with the coronavirus. So we still hoped in April that we could welcome the visitors to Jerusalem. And by the end of May, we realized we really need to go online. And we looked at the different options. To cut the story short, we had a high-tech company in Tel Aviv that was programming our own software, our own platform for an online conference. And what we were envisioning was indeed taking place. We took the Feast of Tabernacles to the nations. Now, this year's Feast of Tabernacles, what we anticipated from the beginning, that this would be a record number, it became the largest feast that we ever celebrated at the Christian Embassy. Due to the technologies that were made available to us here in the land of Israel, and that where we hired some of the programmers in Tel Aviv, due to these software solutions, we had more than 100 seminars that we could offer about Israel, about Christian Zionism, about various topics of Bible teachings. We had more than 24 virtual tours where people, when they could not come to the land, they could still visit more than 24 places in the Holy Land. We came every day from the Sukkot period, every day for 7 days. We came live from various locations to the households around the world. We went to Qasr al-Yahud, the baptism site of John the Baptist. We went to the southern steps where the pilgrims normally 2,000 years would have entered the temple, and we were posting the flags of the nations at the southern steps of the Temple Mount. And then we had a 24-hour, 7 days prayer chain on Zoom that was going on. It was an amazing program, and people from around the world, they said it was indeed Jerusalem coming to our homes. Now, if anybody is listening from around the world and you are planning your conferences, there are amazing solutions available here in the land of Israel to take your event to the nations and to address a large audience. This was one of the most successful feasts in our history, and we did reach the largest number of people around the world. At the same time, we also were at the different television stations. I think we had 8 TV stations that broadcast the feast around the world, and one of them was God TV. I know, Walt Simpson, you are watching right now. Thanks too much for God TV for helping us. My message today to the media people around the world is that what looks like a crisis can become a blessing to reach more people with your message than ever before, because people do want to be informed what is taking place, and they are watching online events like never before. So this was a great year of opportunity. And in closing, I also want to assure you that our audience became active. This was the strongest year since a long time where we could give more support to Israel than ever before. That means the Christian Zionist movement around the world is still alive and kicking, even in the midst of COVID-19, and they are there to defend Israel, to bless Israel, to pray for Israel like never before. It's a season of opportunity, and of course, it is also a season where we hope to see you all physically back here in the land of Israel. God bless you here from Jerusalem, and I hope to see you physically next year at the Feast of Tabernacles.
Dr. Jorgen Buehler, thank you so much for your amazing work. And now for the next chapter, the Christian Broadcasting Network is one of the largest media outlets in the US. Mr. Gordon Robertson is the president and CEO of this amazing network, has a moving message for you, representative of Christian media outlets around the world. This message greatly important in times of rising anti-Semitism and the global pandemic that we are facing everywhere. Mr. Robertson, please.
Hello, this is Gordon Robertson, and I want to send special greetings to the Christian Media Conference, everyone at the Friends of Zion Museum, and to my dear friend Mike Evans. May God bless you as you gather together to strategize how to help Israel in these difficult days. We're seeing peace break out with the UAE and with Bahrain. Wouldn't it be wonderful if peace spread throughout the Middle East? Here's something that was on my heart. I want to share a scripture with you. It's from Isaiah 49, and this is a prophecy of Israel, the modern day Israel. It was insufficient that you be a servant for me, only to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the ruins of Israel. I will make you a light for the nations, so that my salvation may extend to the ends of the earth. This was a scripture that inspired David Ben-Gurion, and in his writings, he talked about Israel's purpose as he was forming the modern state, as he was working in the 1920s, 1930s, working so diligently to create Israel. This was on his heart. And we today need to recognize the purpose of Israel is not just to gather the tribes, not just to restore the ruins, not just to make the desert bloom, but it's time for Israel to be a light to the nations. When you look at the emblem of Israel, you see the menorah right there. That was to recognize that on the very emblem of the state of Israel, there is a light to the nations. I like to remind people the menorah is now outside the temple, and that menorah is Israel, as Israel becomes and is a light to the nation, repairing the world, bringing good things to people. So as Christian communicators, as people in Christian media, our job is to tell the world about what Israel is doing. Now, I know in these times of boycott, divestment, sanctions, it's a difficult task. I, like many of you, have been incredibly dismayed at the rise of anti-Semitism we're seeing throughout the world. Here in America, in France today, throughout Europe, in the Middle East, the rise of anti-Semitism can literally discourage you. You're wondering, where is the source of this, and why does it continue even in the year 2020? Why do we still have these things? And then on top of it, you had a global pandemic. It can lead to discouragement. Here's something else from Isaiah, and let me remind you that the Isaiah scroll was rediscovered, if you will, in a cave in Qumran, as part of the birthing of the nation of Israel. It's the only complete scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's a prophecy of Israel. But in that prophecy, here's a word of encouragement, and this tells you what God is doing. He will not fail, nor be discouraged, till he has established justice in the earth. And let that be our call and our mission, that we are not going to fail. We're not going to be discouraged. Greater is he who is with us than he who is in the world. We will work together with God Almighty to establish justice in the earth. Let that be our mission. Let that be our call. Be a light to the nations. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. This has been a very busy night for all of us. We think that this will be a great time to stop for a few minutes and return to the wonderful musical duo accompanying us tonight. Yonina. Hi, Nina.
To sing this song of Jerusalem here in this magical city.
Really seeing the prophecies coming true. אוויר הרים צלול כיין וריח אורנים נישא ברוח ארבעים עם כל פעמונים
מופתע דמעת אילן ואבן שבויה בחלומה העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה חומה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור איך יבשו בורות המים כיכר השוק ריקה ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה ובמראות אשר בסלע מהללות רוחות ואין יורד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור חזרנו אל בורות המים לשוק ולכיכר שופר קורא בהר הבית בעיר העתיקה ובמראות אשר בסלע אלפי שמשות צורחות נשוב נרד אל ים המלח בדרך יריחו ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושלום
הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור
Wow, thank you so much, Yonina. That was amazing. Thank you. The COVID-19 pandemic has dictated our lives for the past several months. Many lives have been taken by this horrible pandemic, and many others are still fighting for their recovery. We could use as many prayers as we can get. We pray for the recovery of the ill, a quick vaccine, and the quickest end to this pandemic. Our senior coordinator of international religious press, the lovely Mrs. Hadassah Schwartz, will talk to us about the religious challenges during these crazy times. Hadassah, good evening.
Good evening. Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We heard over the last couple of hours so much about the various aspects of this COVID-19 pandemic. We heard about the challenges, we heard about the health challenges, and we have many other challenges that people face. There are physical challenges, there are mental challenges, some people actually lost their lives. But there's one aspect that I would like to address here tonight that I think that is relevant to all of us as believers, and that is the religious challenge. We are used to worshiping God, we are believers, and in the end of the day, our worship is between us and God. But one thing that we're used to is not here anymore. In many countries, the places of worship closed down. There are no synagogues, there are no churches. Many places have restrictions on the amount of people that could enter these places. And the way we used to worship God within our community, in unity, all connected, has now changed completely. We are also used to having and sharing information this generation in a click of a button. In a second, we can just go on Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and we have an illusion of connection. But why do I say an illusion? Because at the end of the day, we are not together. Same thing when we want to worship God. We can't worship God scrolling through Facebook. We can't through Snapchat or Twitter, because we're not together the way we are used to. So right now, I would like to use this togetherness, that we are all here together right now, although physically apart, but together through technology, and utilize this time, connect all of us, and pray together. We have this video prepared. Some of you sent in a pre-recorded video of this prayer. The ones who didn't, you are more than welcome to join us. And let's all pray together to God to lift this horrible pandemic from above us. Same way He brought it, He can also take it away. Please.
May it be your will, faithful God, Father of mercy, who is a faithful healer.
Send healing and abundant loving kindness, pardon and compassion to all the sick who have been infected with this disease.
Please, Lord, bestow your mercy on all inhabitants of the world.
And on all your people, Israel.
Rise from the seat of judgment and sit on the seat of mercy.
Transcend the letter of the law and cancel all harsh and evil decrees over us.
Then stood up Phinehas and wrought judgment, and so the plague was stayed.
Our Father, our King, withhold the plague from our inheritance.
Decree for us good and comforting decrees of salvation on behalf of your mercy.
Tear up the evil of the decree of our judgment and call forth our merits.
Help us and redeem us on behalf of your loving kindness.
Hear the voice of our entreaties, because you hear all prayers.
Blessed is he who hears prayers. Hallelujah. Amen.
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 Amen v'amen. This summit is coming to its end, and we would like to hear from you the feedback of your thoughts and comments on the fight against the pandemic, the media's role in it, in this summit. And I would like to invite Mr. Nitsan back on stage to conduct this last part of the summit.
Thank you, Lital. Thank you, everybody. I think the last 4 hours, it was really fascinating and inspiring, and we said in Hebrew, Adam koneh et olamo sha'ah achad. The Jewish sages say that one can achieve a greatness in 1 hour if we can gather together in prayer. So we have just finished the high holidays, and during the days of penitence, one prayer that we say is, hear our voice, Hashem, our God, accept our praise sympathetically and willingly, and do not forsake us during these dark days. So I really pray on behalf of all of us, so that this pray and your family's health, prosperity, and I pray that together with you to see you in person at the 5th Christian Media Summit next year here in Jerusalem at the Holy Land. So to summarize this fourth summit that we did it in by Zoom, I would like to call to the stage all of my colleagues from the GPO, from the Zion Museum. Please come to the stage, and we all sing together with you, by Zoom, from every place that you're here. We will share together Hatikva, the national anthems, the hymn of the Jewish song, the Israeli song. Please, don't be shy. Take the microphone with you, and we all sing together Hatikva, together with Yonina Band. Where is Yonina Band? Are you ready? So, please give us count till 5, and we all sing together the 4th Christian Media Summit with all the colleagues from the staff of FOS, Friends of Zion Museum, and the GPO, together with Yonina Band. Please. Thank you. God bless you all. See you in Jerusalem next year. Thank you.